Captain Ray Carter walked into the Grand Galactic Council chamber, surrounded by aliens from every corner of the galaxy. He wore his polished uniform, nerves hidden behind a calm face, but inside he was tense. This meeting was important, a final attempt at peace. War had been threatening to erupt for months between major species, and Earth had just recently joined the Council. Ray was humanity's chosen voice, young but sharp, a soldier turned diplomat. Across the room, tall and graceful, stood Velerin, the Zilari envoy. Her silver skin shimmered under the dome lights, her long dark hair tied back with warrior beads, and her sharp eyes scanned the room like she was still on a battlefield. The Zilari were one of the oldest and most feared warrior species in the galaxy. They were proud, traditional, and did not easily trust others. Ray had studied a little about their culture, but not enough. He only knew they respected strength, honor, and clarity, and they were dangerous when confused. When Velerin stepped forward to speak, the room fell silent. Ray looked at her, trying to appear open and friendly. He gave her a simple smile, a normal human smile, relaxed and kind. But Velerin froze, her silver eyes widened. The Zilari guards beside her stiffened. A whisper ran through their ranks. Then, without warning, Velerin stepped forward and spoke clearly, her voice echoing across the chamber. "The human has chosen me as mate. I accept." Ray's smile vanished. Confused, he blinked. Wait, what? But it was too late. The declaration had been made in front of dozens of alien witnesses. The chamber exploded into shouts. The Turgan delegates hissed in rage. The Voskari slammed their clawed fists on the table. Several others rose to their feet in protest. Velerin, however, remained calm and steady. She approached Ray, placed a hand firmly on his chest, and declared again, "You are now my bonded mate. My people will honor this." Ray felt like the floor had dropped beneath him. "I didn't mean," he tried to explain, but Velerin had already turned to leave, her warriors surrounding her in tight formation. The news spread like wildfire. Zilari warships began to move within hours, surrounding neutral systems. Treaties crumbled. The Voskari believed the Zilari and humans were forming a secret alliance. The Turgan took it as a direct insult. A dozen more species grew suspicious, angry, afraid. Small conflicts sparked across the stars, and by the end of that day, 27 fleets had declared war, not just against the Zilari, but against Earth as well. Ray Carter, Earth's representative, had unintentionally started galaxy-wide war because of a smile. He sat in the command deck of the HSS Resolute, stunned and exhausted, staring at the tactical map where red markers flashed across the star systems. Each red mark meant incoming hostiles. Velerin had arrived uninvited on his ship, claiming traditional Zilari rights of protection now that they were bonded. Her warriors patrolled his halls like they owned the place. Ray had tried again and again to tell her it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, but she always responded the same way. "You exposed your teeth and looked into my eyes. You smiled. That is a formal expression of life bonding in my culture. You should have known." He threw up his hands. "Well, I didn't. On Earth, it just means hello." Velerin simply tilted her head and said, "Then your customs are dangerously careless." He had no argument. Earth was now in danger. The colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan were exposed. The Zilari claimed loyalty and stood beside humans for now, but Ray knew this war would not be easy. The first real test came quickly. Mars was under attack. The Voskari fleet had jumped into orbit and begun bombing the upper atmosphere. Ray took the Resolute to defend the colony. Valeran followed. Her ship a sleek, black destroyer called Fang of Fire. Human and Zilari ships formed a fragile line together. The Voskari outnumbered them 5-1. Ray coordinated the defense, ordering drone swarms and flanking maneuvers, but nothing was working. The enemy flagship, a golden behemoth, stood untouched. Valeran pointed to it on the screen. That is their Blood Empress's ship. Destroy it and their fleet will break. Ray looked at the ship's shields and defenses. That's suicide. Valeran's eyes narrowed with something close to amusement. Then let us die as legends. Ray had no choice. He gave the order. The Resolute and Fang of Fire led the charge. Explosions ripped through space. Human and Zilari pilots fought shoulder to shoulder. Lasers lit the dark like lightning. Ray's ship took multiple hits. Valeran's destroyer was half destroyed. By the time it reached the flagship, then she did the unthinkable. She rammed it. The enemy shield cracked. Ray followed with a full missile barrage. The Voskari flagship exploded in a burst of golden fire. Their fleet scattered in panic, retreating into the void. Mars was saved for now. Ray collapsed into his seat, hands trembling. The battle had been too close. The cost had been high. The screen blinked and Valeran's image appeared. She was wounded, her face streaked with alien blood, but she was smiling. That same calm, quiet smile from earlier. But this time, Ray didn't smile back. He just raised his hand in a salute. Valeran returned the gesture with a nod, then faded from the screen. Ray sat alone, breathing hard. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but now he understood one thing clearly. His life was no longer just his own. And the galaxy had changed forever, all because of a smile that was never meant to mean so much. Captain Ray Carter stood on the bridge of the HSS Resolute, his eyes fixed on the holographic map showing the solar system under threat. Red symbols blinked across the screen, each one representing an enemy fleet. Earth was the heart of humanity. But the colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan were all exposed. His mistake at the Galactic Council, the accidental smile, had started a war, and now the price was being paid in fire. Valeran, the Zilari warrior who had claimed him as her bonded mate, stood beside him with her arms crossed and her silver armor stained from past battles. She had come aboard the Resolute without asking, bringing her soldiers with her, and now she acted like she had every right to command. Ray had tried again to tell her it was a misunderstanding, that he never meant to propose anything, but Valeran didn't care. "You caused this storm," she said coldly, "so now you will stand with me in it." Ray wanted to argue, but she was right. They had no time left for talking. Reports came in from Mars. Voskari warships were entering orbit and attacking the colony domes. People were dying. Ray ordered the fleet to move immediately. The Resolute and several human warships jumped into Mars orbit, with Valeran Zilari destroyers joining them. The enemy had already started their attack. Giant Voskari dreadnoughts floated in the sky like black mountains, firing plasma into the surface. Defense cannons on Mars fired back, but they were being overwhelmed. Human fighters launched in waves, but they were heavily outnumbered. Ray watched as one of their carriers exploded in a flash of light. They were losing. He studied the battlefield and started shouting orders, using every tactic he could to slow the Voskari advance flank attacks, coordinated missile strikes, and drone swarms. Still, it wasn't enough. Valeran stepped forward and pointed to a massive golden ship in the center of the enemy fleet. "That one," she said. "It carries their Blood Empress. If we destroy her, the Voskari will fall apart." Ray stared at the ship. It was heavily protected, its shields glowing bright blue, with dozens of escort ships surrounding it. "That's suicide," he muttered. Valeran didn't blink. "Then let's die as legends," she said calmly, as if she had already accepted the price. Ray hesitated only for a moment. He knew she was right again. If they didn't do something bold, Mars would fall. He gave the order, and both fleets surged forward, human and Zalari ships flying side by side. The enemy opened fire. The sky lit up with beams and explosions. Fighters were ripped apart. Destroyers crashed into each other. The Resolute pushed forward through the chaos, shields flashing and hull groaning. Ray kept shouting commands, even as sparks flew around him. Next to them, Valeran's flagship Fang of Fire was hit again and again, but it never slowed. It moved like a predator, cutting through enemy lines. When they finally reached the enemy flagship, Valeran's ship didn't fire, it rammed it. The sound of metal against shield rang out across space. Her ship cracked the enemy barrier. Ray saw the opening. He launched all remaining torpedoes, locked onto the breach, and fired. The missiles struck. A brilliant explosion tore the Golden ship apart. The shockwave knocked ships away in every direction. The enemy fleet hesitated, then scattered in panic. The Voskari retreated. Mars was saved. Ray collapsed into his seat, sweat pouring down his face, his hands shaking. The battle had nearly destroyed them. The comms crackled, and Valeran's face appeared on the screen. She was bloodied, her armor scorched, but she was smiling again, that same strange smile he had seen back at the council, the one that started everything. Ray didn't return it. Not this time. He simply raised his hand in salute, his eyes locked with hers. She gave a small nod in return before the screen went dark. The sky above Mars was still filled with smoke, but for the first time in days, it was quiet. Ray knew it wouldn't last. This was only the beginning. The galaxy was burning, and somehow he had to fight beside a woman he barely understood, a woman who had claimed him, a woman who just helped him save a world. Captain Ray Carter and Valeran were no longer strangers in battle. After the fight for Mars, human and Zalari forces began working together more closely. Valeran spent days training Earth soldiers in hand-to-hand combat and precision tactics. Her methods were harsh, but effective. Ray, meanwhile, helped Zalari tacticians understand how humans fought, not just with strength, but with creativity and quick thinking. They had become a strange but powerful team. Still, not everyone believed in their bond. Whispers spread on both sides. Many humans still didn't trust Valeran or her people, and some Zalari warriors thought their princess was dishonoring her bloodline by choosing a human. But none of that mattered when the Turgan attacked a remote colony outpost near the edge of human space. The colony sent a distress call, reporting that several transport shuttles were being torn from the skies. Without waiting for backup, Ray and Valerian led a small force to respond. Their ships arrived to find the colony burning and enemy gunships circling overhead. Ray and Valerian landed with a small squad and quickly moved through the wreckage, trying to evacuate survivors. But then the Turgan launched a surprise ambush in a narrow canyon pass. Explosions rocked the rocks above. The squad was scattered, and Ray and Valerian were cut off from the others. Trapped in a dead-end canyon with enemies all around, they had to fight side by side with no help coming. Ray used his railgun to shoot down snipers while Valerian leapt between cover, her plasma blade flashing in the dust. A grenade blast threw Ray against a rock wall, and he felt a sharp pain in his ribs. He could barely stand. A Turgan warrior charged at him, but Valerian moved faster, cutting the creature down before it reached him. Breathing hard, Ray leaned on her for support. She didn't complain. Instead, she pulled him toward a nearby cave where they could hide for the night. Inside, the air was cold and their wounds ached. They had no food, little water, and their cums were dead. As they sat in the dark, Ray tried to stay awake. He looked at Valerian, noticing the cuts across her arms and the blood staining her silver armor. For the first time, she looked tired, not just physically, but deep inside. Quietly, she spoke. She told Ray about her life before the council, about the endless training, the weight of her family's expectations, and the loneliness that came with being a warrior leader. Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Ray, in return, told her how afraid he had been not of dying in battle, but of making the wrong call, of watching good people fall because of his decisions. They were both leaders, both tired of being symbols. For a few hours, they were just two people sitting in silence. At one point, Valerian leaned forward and placed her forehead gently against Ray's. "We are bound," she said quietly, "not by mistake, but by battle." Ray didn't speak. He just nodded. When morning came, they fought their way back to the surface, guiding a group of survivors they had found deeper in the cave tunnels. Together, they pushed through enemy lines, reaching the evacuation zone just in time for a dropship to pick them up. As the ship lifted off, Valerian and Ray stood side by side, bloodied and bruised, watching the burning colony fall behind them. Word of their survival spread quickly. People saw the footage of Valerian carrying Ray, of Ray shielding her with his body, of two different species fighting together with no hesitation. The alliance grew stronger. Some started calling them the Bond of Fire. And though Ray still didn't fully understand what their connection meant, one thing was becoming clear. They weren't just allies anymore. They were partners in battle, in pain, and maybe, just maybe, in something deeper neither of them could name yet. Trouble began to grow not from the enemy's fleets, but from within humanity's own ranks. One quiet night aboard the HSS Resolute, Captain Ray Carter was walking through a dark corridor when he was suddenly attacked. A cloaked figure leaped from the shadows with a long blade. Ray barely dodged in time, grabbing a pipe from the wall to defend himself. The assassin moved fast, too fast to be human. As the blade came down again, a blur of silver struck from behind. Valerian, swift and silent, plunged her blade into the attacker's back, killing him instantly. Blood pooled at their feet. Ray breathed heavily, shaken. Valerian's face was hard, but her voice was calm. "Someone inside your command gave our position away." They checked the dead assassin's markings and confirmed it. He was from the Iridians, a cold and brutal hive species that used stealth and mind control. Someone from Earth's own leadership had told the Iridians where Ray would be, hoping he wouldn't survive. The betrayal was deep and dangerous. Together, Ray and Valeran began tracing the leak. They followed communication records, encrypted signals, and shadow reports. What they found chilled them. Admiral Kier, a high-ranking human officer, had been secretly working with the Iridians. He had formed a secret alliance, convinced that humanity's survival depended on cutting ties with the Zilari and keeping Earth pure from alien bonds. Ray confronted Kier in the command chamber, guards watching from every corner. "You tried to kill me," Ray said, fury building in his voice. "You risked Earth's future." Kier didn't deny it. "You let that alien warrior march into our halls and call you her mate. What did you expect?" he growled. "You're bringing her war into our home." Before things turned violent, Valeran stepped forward. Her eyes were ice. "You fear us because you do not understand us. But fear makes you weak, and betrayal makes you smaller than even your enemy." Kier was arrested, his supporters removed. But the damage was done. Ray saw the doubt in some of his own officers' eyes. Not everyone trusted the Zilari, and some barely trusted him now. In a quiet moment later, Valeran spoke while looking out the observation window. "Your people fear mine." Ray nodded slowly, standing beside her. "Then we have to show them what we can do together. Not just in battle, but in loyalty." Valeran turned to him, her expression unreadable, and said nothing more. She just stood there with him, shoulder to shoulder, as stars passed by like dust. They both knew the coming days would not just test them on the battlefield, but in the hearts of those they were fighting to protect. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild, but Ray was ready to fight for it, not just with weapons, but with truth. A sudden emergency call came from Europa, one of Jupiter's frozen moons. The Iridians had attacked the colony there, using dark matter bombs to freeze the ocean solid and trap thousands of people beneath the ice. Ray Carter and Valeran didn't wait for orders, they led a rescue mission themselves. As their ships entered Europa's orbit, they saw the damage from space. Great sheets of ice had cracked the colony domes, and buildings had collapsed under the weight. Ray quickly organized the air teams to begin evacuations, while Valeran gathered a ground strike force to break through enemy lines. She led her team into the underground ice tunnels where survivors were trapped, and Ray, refusing to stay behind, followed her. The deeper they went, the darker and colder it became. Creatures from the Iridian swarm crawled across the ceilings, using the shadows to attack. Valeran moved like a storm, her glowing blade cutting down anything that came close. Ray used his rifle to cover the rear, but their path was never clear. The tunnels shifted, and the ice cracked above their heads. While saving a group of trapped colonists, Ray was struck by falling debris. His left arm went numb, and he struggled to stay on his feet. Valeran noticed immediately and pulled him behind cover. He tried to wave her off, but she wouldn't leave him. As more enemies closed in, she fought with one hand while holding onto Ray with the other. Even when she took a plasma bolt to the side, she kept moving. Blood ran down her armor, but she didn't slow down. Ray was in pain, his breath short, but he used every ounce of strength to help her lift the wounded civilians. Together, they moved from one pocket of trapped survivors to the next, using charges to open blocked paths and explosives to collapse tunnels behind them. Every step was harder than the last. At one point, Valoran collapsed from exhaustion, and Ray caught her before she hit the ground. "You saved me," he whispered. "Now it's my turn." He carried her for a while, refusing to stop. Even when frost formed on his skin and his legs trembled, he didn't let her fall. After hours of cold and silence, they finally reached a tunnel opening where a rescue ship hovered. The rest of the squad, along with newly freed survivors, were waiting. They pulled Ray and Valeran aboard just as the ceiling collapsed behind them. As the ship rose into the sky, everyone stared at the two of them, wounded, frozen, and barely standing, but alive. The footage spread fast across human and alien networks. People saw a human commander carrying a Zelari warrior through the ice. They saw Valeran, bleeding and battered, protecting Earth's children. No speech could have done more to unite hearts. For many, the moment proved that this bond, this strange partnership, was not a mistake. It was something real, something powerful. Back aboard the Resolute, Ray sat beside Valeran in the medical bay. Both of them were bruised and bandaged, but they said nothing for a while. Words didn't matter. Their silence was full of meaning. Outside, the stars continued to burn, and war still raged across the galaxy. But on Europa, something had changed. The alliance was no longer just between fleets or flags. It was between two souls who refused to leave each other behind. All warnings pointed to a final massive attack. The enemy had gathered a super fleet, the largest ever seen, over 40,000 warships from species who once sat on the Galactic Council. Now they were united by fear, pride, and anger, and their target was Earth. The sky around the planet filled with enemy signals, and humanity prepared for its last stand. The colonies sent every ship they had. The Zelari sent warriors and heavy cruisers. Other small eyes, inspired by what Ray and Valeran had done, arrived with what little they could offer. The fleet that formed in Earth's orbit was smaller, less powerful, but full of courage. Ray stood before the gathered command, voice steady. "This is our home. We fight together. We do not run." Valeran stood beside him in full battle. Armor, her eyes shining like silver fire. "We make our stand," she said, loud and clear. And so, the battle for Earth began. The first enemy wave hit like a storm, shaking the shields of the defending ships. Ray's carrier, the Resolute, took the lead alongside Valeran's as warship. Fang of fire, their ships moved like wolves in battle fast, deadly, and in perfect rhythm. Human fighters darted between heavy alien cruisers, dropping mines and plasma bombs. Zelari boarding teams launched themselves onto enemy hulls, blades in hand. The sky became a sea of fire and metal. Explosions lit the darkness like new stars. Ray's voice never stopped giving orders. He sent units where the line thinned, called for emergency pickups when ships were falling, and pushed forward even when hope seemed thin. Then a massive alien war barge aimed directly for Earth's defense platform. If it broke through, the planet would be exposed. Ray ordered his ship to intercept, but before they could get there, a smaller Zelari corvette slammed into the barge's engines and exploded. Valeran watched the screen, face still but heart burning. That was one of her own. The loss only pushed her harder. She and Ray dove into the enemy line. The Resolute took heavy damage. Sparks flew inside the bridge. Smoke filled the air. Then a bright light hit the main screen. An enemy cruiser had locked on, charging its main cannon. Valeran saw it a second before it fired and shouted Ray's name. She moved in front of him, trying to take the blast. But Ray reacted faster. He jumped in front of her. The blast struck the shield, throwing him hard against the wall. He collapsed, blood on his forehead. Valeran screamed in Zalari tongue and led a counterattack that destroyed the cruiser in a wave of burning debris. Medics rushed to Ray. He was alive, barely, and whispering orders even as they treated him. Don't stop. Fight's not over. Valeran stayed by his side. Her blade bloodied, her armor cracked, but her spirit unbroken. More enemy ships were falling now. Some turned and fled as their command structure collapsed. The defenders pushed harder, refusing to give up the sky. After hours of fighting, the last wave fell back. The storm fleet had been broken. Earth still stood. The stars around it were littered with wreckage and glowing metal, but no enemy remained. Cheers erupted across the remaining ships. Ray opened his eyes in the medbay, pale but smiling weakly. Valeran leaned close, her hand gripping his tightly. "You took the blow for me," she said quietly. Ray smiled again, even through the pain. "Couldn't let you die. I still owe you for Mars." Valeran closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with fire. "Then we are even now." And for the first time, there was peace not just between two soldiers, but between two worlds. The war was finally over. The great enemy fleets had been destroyed, and Earth still shined in the sky. The stars were quiet now, filled with wreckage and memories. Ray Carter stood in the recovery ward of the Resolute, his wounds still healing, but his heart heavier than ever. He had seen thousands die, humans, Zalari, and others who had stood beside them. Victory had come, but at a price no one would ever forget. Across the galaxy, the Council was broken. The great empires that had once ruled with pride were now silent, scattered. Many species withdrew to rebuild, while others sent messages of peace. Humanity, once the outsider, now stood as a central force respected, feared, and admired. Ray had been offered medals, awards, and promotions. People called him a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He had never wanted this war, and the choices he had made weighed on his soul. What mattered to him now was something else entirely. When the ceremony was held on the Zalari homeworld, a massive event with banners, fires, and the roar of warriors. Gathered in great halls, Ray didn't wear his uniform. He arrived quietly, walking beside Valeran, dressed in simple black. She had invited him not as a commander, but as something more. Their bond, which had begun by accident, had become unshakable. They had fought together, bled together, saved each other more times than they could count. Now it was time to decide what that bond truly meant. In the heart of the ancient Zalari temple, carved into stone with burning lights above, Ray stood. Before a circle of elders and warriors, Valeran stepped forward, dressed in her ceremonial armor, not polished for show, but scarred from real battles. She placed her blade at Ray's feet, the symbol of her people's deepest vow. Then she looked into his eyes and asked only one thing. Do you now understand what your smile meant? Ray took a breath. He remembered that day at the council. How a simple human gesture had sparked fire across the galaxy. He had meant it. As a friendly sign, nothing more. But now, standing here, seeing Valoran as more than just a warrior, seeing her as someone who had trusted him, fought for him, and nearly died beside him, he understood. That smile had become a promise. He looked at her and answered softly, "I didn't mean to propose when I smiled that day. But now I do." Silence filled the hall. Then Valoran stepped forward and pressed her hand over his heart. Then, "It is done," she said. The warriors around them let out a single deep chant. The bond was sealed, not by mistake, not by tradition, but by choice. Later that night, Ray stood with Valoran on the balcony of the temple, looking up at the stars. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The galaxy was watching, but they didn't care about that either. They had walked through fire together and come out stronger. Whatever came next, peace, rebuilding, or new storms, they would face it side by side. Two warriors from different worlds, now united. And for the first time, Ray felt truly at peace. He had smiled once, and the stars had gone to war. Now he smiled again, and the stars could finally begin to heal.